It is now time for the Let's Talk Weddings podcast. Here's your host, wedding DJ and MC of Buzzard Ball DJ Entertainment in Sacramento, California, Steve Buzzard.
Welcome in, everybody. It is Let's Talk Weddings. We are into episode number 3. Today, we're going to talk about the wedding coordinator, and I am so happy to have Hannah Baker on. She is joining us from Idaho. She just recently moved up there a couple months ago, but I met her doing weddings in California. By the way, she still does weddings in California, and today we are really going to pull back the curtain and talk about the perspective from a wedding coordinator, right? Pretty amazing to me. We shared the stat. We're going to share the stat in the podcast that only 27% of couples use a wedding coordinator. I got to be honest with you. I am blown away by that stat. But after you listen to Hannah today, not only are you going to realize, man, I need a wedding coordinator if you're a couple out there. Secondly, you're going to go, man, I should hire Hannah. She's really good. And thirdly, realize just the importance of having a WC as a part of your special day. It's like something I believe that you should have in place no matter what. And they provide options. This is Sage Weddings and Events, Sage Weddings, and I think you're going to be very, very excited. So don't want to waste any more time. I'm really excited to jump into this conversation. In fact, enjoy the conversation. All right, everybody, welcome in. It is Let's Talk Weddings, the brand new podcast that I've put together. This is episode number 3, and I am so excited because today we talk about the importance of having a wedding coordinator, and I have brought on Hannah Baker of Sage Weddings and Events. And Hannah and I have worked together many, many times, and I'm like, yes, I've got to bring her on. Hannah, how are you doing today?
I'm doing so good. So excited to be here. So thank you.
Yeah, and so you told me right before we came on, you've never done something like this before. Are you a little bit nervous?
A little bit.
A little bit.
We're on stage all the time as wedding vendors, so.
Yeah, right. And listen, this will be fun because I want to center it around, obviously, your company, but talking about the wedding industry through the eyes of a wedding coordinator, right? It's interesting because I like to go to Google and I like to do just like a fun facts thing. And so I typed in today, wedding planner fun facts. And the one I came across that I was actually surprised is that 27% of couples only hire a wedding planner. I feel like that number should be so much bigger, right, Hannah?
I agree with you, but it is a very minute number compared to how many weddings there are each year.
Yeah, good point. And so let's talk about your business. Introduce your business to everyone out there.
Oh, absolutely. So I'm Hannah. I have a wedding planning and designing company called Sage Weddings. It's named after our dog, Sage. If you go on our website, she has a little bio on there and everything like that. She's the ray of sunshine everyone needs in their lives. So that's why it's named after her. But we do everything from day of to full planning and design. And I like to say our team kind of lives, eats, and breathes weddings. So it's a lot of fun.
And how we came together was a couple years ago, and I have spoken about this in terms of weddings. I know we've only done 3 episodes, but the one thing I mention is the power of partnerships and power of friendships. And you and I came across each other a few years ago at a wedding. We've worked a few since together, but really being able to work with vendors that you just feel comfortable with. And so I want to start right there because I think the teamwork aspect is so big and it's such an advantage for couples because if you suggest vendors and I suggest vendors and some of those end up being the same, it's like that's such peace of mind for couples out there.
Oh, absolutely. As I'm sure you have as well, we have our kind of preferred vendor list per se that we always send over to our couples, you, one of the DJs being on it. It's always so wonderful when our couples trust us, and I'm sure you feel the same way when you send them too. All of a sudden you have a team of people that you've worked with several times before and you just have no doubt that the day is going to run smoothly. So yeah, it's absolutely wonderful. And I can say, the vendors in the Sacramento region in general, every person we've worked with is absolutely wonderful. So it's hard to determine those preferred vendors, but Yeah, it's great.
No, but I think that's good though, because I think the other piece of this too, and that people may not understand, is that you have multiple people that you go to within the same category. So Hannah's not always coming to me because her weddings are going to look different. And she might look at it as me not being the right fit. And guess what? That's okay. The same for me is like Hannah's like one of 4 or 5 wedding coordinators that I work with, and it's just developing those partnerships. And so if you can come in, I guess, with the perspective of it's okay, don't take it personal. It's just a thing because there's so many of us and there are so many weddings out there. But I will say it's always nice to get a text from Hannah and say, hey, are you available on such and such a day? And here's the thing about Hannah, very easy to work with. And so I want to start there is like really being a wedding coordinator. I think it takes a certain type of person. Can you describe what that person is? Because you're definitely in that category.
Yeah, I think it's hard to say we're just one category because there's so many different wedding planners out there. But I would say, kind of as an overall encompassing thing, you have to be calm, very calm, cool, and collected per se. You need to be the person that's the soundboard for your couples, making sure that when they're getting stressed, that you're calming them and just reassuring them everything's great. And also being that person that has every single detail in place before they ask about it. So I'm very type A, and it makes our couples feel a lot better with timelines and everything like that. So I think that's a really important aspect. And then just being, really conversational and very black and white with your couples to make sure that expectations are in line and everything like that. But I think there's a lot of different things that can go into a wedding planner, but those are the ones that I find are the best so
I
far.
like it. No, you encapsulated that very well. And for Hannah, when you think about, and I don't like to use the word stigma, but when you think of wedding coordinator, to me, it's like, to me, it just feels like stress. And so when I come across someone like Hannah, who is indeed everything that she just described, being very calm, seems to have this great ability to work with couples. It's like, I just don't think people realize or understand the benefit, the true benefits of having a wedding coordinator. And maybe you can address that because why is it that, and I know budget wise, like that's a big thing, but the importance of having a wedding coordinator to me is like night and day.
Yes, I would agree with you. And we have a lot of couples that come on where maybe we chat with the bride and they're like, I think I need a wedding planner, but my fiance isn't convinced yet. So, what I always tell them is, at the very least, maybe consult with someone to do a timeline to make sure that that's in place for you because that's really important for the wedding day itself. To make sure that you know when speeches are happening and you know who's walking with who down the aisle and all of the small details you may not think about if you don't plan a wedding every day. Going from that, a wedding planner is really important because we're not related to you. So if you had Aunt Sally there getting you down the aisle, everything like that, she's going to want to enjoy herself later in the evening and not want to break down your personal decor, or she might miss when you're doing speeches because she is, talking with Uncle Bob at the bar or something like that. So just having someone who's separated from the wedding to make sure that you're really hitting every milestone in planning and also making sure that you can really just have a stress-free day is the selling point, in my opinion,
Yeah,
to
I
just
think
make sure that,
the stress-free day is really, really big. And that's actually exactly how I speak to couples is like, you are paying good money, right? And you're making an investment. And I like that because you actually use that on your website as being an investment so that you can really enjoy your day. I always feel bad for like couples and families and stuff that when the wedding's over, they stay and they're cleaning up and you're like, oh man, this is the last thing you should be doing. You should put it into the hands of the professional to be able to take care of that so you can truly enjoy your day.
Exactly. I absolutely agree. The last thing we want our couples to do is lift a finger on their wedding days. So I always tell them that in the consultation phase is, we set things up, we take it down. You're just there to enjoy yourselves. It's your wedding day. So
I love it. I love it. So let's break it down. So we talked about the company. I've got my little list of questions that I like to ask all my vendors. And let's talk about Hannah Baker getting started in this industry. What were you like as a kid? What kind of led to this being a career for you?
Yeah. So I've always been a very creative mind. I used to tell my parents growing up that I wanted to be a pastry chef and I wanted to go to college for it because I was always like baking and designing things and all of that stuff. And I thought that's where I really wanted to like funnel everything in. And my dad said, absolutely not. You have to get a business degree. We have to have something to land on if it doesn't work out. And I thank him every day for that. So I grew up, my mom was in restaurants, everything like that. So I was kind of always around like hospitality and events and just a very like outward butterfly bubbly person. So it just kind of naturally transitioned as I was in college. I think it was my sophomore year that I realized like, hey, events is what I want to do. So I minored in special events and tourism, and it kind of flourished from there. And I started working events, and I did everything from being an operations manager to being on the catering side of things to doing marketing, and kind of took everything as a whole so I could understand every aspect that went into it, and then got into wedding planning. And eventually I worked for enough venues that I was like, hey, I want to go out and do this myself, open my own company, and it's just flourished since then. So it's been great. We expanded into Idaho last year, so now we do kind of the Pacific Northwest, including California and Idaho, and it's been great.
Yeah, this is big news for those of you that do know Hannah. Like she was primarily in the California region. That's
Yeah.
how we met. That's how we've worked together. But if you go to our website as of today, it says resides in Idaho, and I'm like, wait, when did Idaho happen? But you told me this was kind of a recent thing, and that's great that you got expansion. But yeah,
Yeah.
now you got California and Idaho.
Exactly. Yeah, we've slowly but surely expanded, and I have Allie, who's our California lead, and she takes care of everything down there, and I kind of fly back and forth, and she lands up here tomorrow for a wedding we have up in the Idaho region. So it's been a really fun journey for all of us.
Well, and this is a great piece too, because I also talk about the fact that you can be a solo operator, which that's what I am. But in your case, you built a little team. Maybe talk about that too, because obviously this would be hard for you to do on your own. Now being in two regions, you
Oh,
built a little team for yourself.
we did. It flourished quite a bit in the past year and a half. We did 36 weddings last year, which taking taking out holidays and everything like that, it's almost a wedding a weekend. Some weekends were doubled up just depending on the size of the wedding. Some aren't. And Allie came onto the team last year. We have Rochelle, who's been on for much longer than that. We have Laura, who I think you've worked with as well, who's in the Nevada region now. She's taking a little hiatus because she just had a baby, but we have several different assistants, so it's been wonderful, and we're thinking about expanding into Colorado next. And
Wow, nonstop.
yeah, it's
What
been great. So
what's
yeah,
that like for you? Because to me, like I've openly admitted this. I tried doing the thing where I had people working for me, and it was too much stress. I don't know if it's because I do a lot of different things that may kind of lend to it.
yeah.
But what's it like for you to like be in charge of an organization where you do have people that you have to rely on?
I've always been kind of a team leader, so I think it's just kind of natural to me. Everyone always says, don't hire your friends, and I did exactly that. I hired
You bucked the trend.
I did, but they have their own unique abilities, and they all bring something different to the wedding atmosphere. Allie, for example, was a pastry chef in a last life. So when we have events that, maybe can't do the cake cutting or anything like that to serve to guests, she jumps in and does those things. So very hands-on, and, she has such an attention to detail. And then Rochelle is such a people person, and they all just kind of make our team a whole. So it's been really wonderful, and I wouldn't have it any other way.
That's great too, because you've created a business where you have different personalities, but it lends to the brand. And
Yes.
that's the thing that's like hard for me to separate, because sometimes like as a solo op, you think it's like personal, and can we have that brand expand outside of who I am, and it's going to be a different personality, will that work? And so I admit I struggle with that, so I applaud someone like yourself that's been able to capture kind of that magic within a team aspect. So job well done. So I have to ask you, do you remember your first wedding as a wedding coordinator?
I don't think I do. If we go
Okay, that's interesting because I've had other people do this too. Like to me, oh, I remember my first wedding, and maybe because it was a disaster, right? Just kind of raw and everything. But you're not the first one to say they don't remember. So maybe that first, I guess, special moment that you may have realized, okay, I'm a wedding coordinator. Would
yeah.
that be something you might be able to recall?
Yeah, I can tell you about like really great weddings that kind of stick out in my mind early
Please
on.
do.
I can tell you that the first wedding I ever did was when I lived in Arizona. I was fresh out of college and it was a reception only, so I wasn't there for ceremony. And the couple was great, but I didn't work super closely with them because I was more of like an event operator, wedding planner at that point. So they kind of did a lot themselves. So maybe that's why it doesn't stick out entirely. I can tell you I 100% remember our first wedding after Sage Weddings was put together as a whole.
Okay.
Steve, you were actually the DJ at it. It was the one for Heidi and Bradley.
Yes, I remember. Let's go. I didn't realize that.
It was our first as Sage Weddings as an entity.
Wow.
I had done them so long before that, but that was our first as like, hey, we're officially a company.
Okay.
That's pretty cool. But yeah, there's been a lot that stick out in my mind. But those first ones, back in my early 20s, I think they all just kind of cranked out and it was me kind of learning the ropes.
Yeah. And talk about that too, because right, you only know what you know.
Yeah.
And I think the learning aspect of it is so interesting to me. Like I can tell you, like I feel very comfortable doing weddings. I still get a little bit nervous, but the fact that when you do more and more and more, I admit it does get a little bit easier.
Yes,
Yeah.
I would agree with that. I think the nerves only really come on for me if I haven't met my couples in person.
Gotcha.
If we've only really talked over video and everything like that. So it's more like excited nervousness to officially meet, the people we're getting down the aisle the next day when we see them. So,
No, that's a big one because the connection piece, right, when you meet through Zoom or in person or whatever, is very big. So I have to ask you, what do you love about your job? What is it about the wedding industry? To me, it's so very special. It's why I started this podcast, but I'm interested from your perspective. What is it that you love about this industry?
Um, the industry itself, I love that we get to work with so many different people and we get to bring so many different weddings and events together and everything is completely different. Weddings themselves, it will always be the fact that we plan with them and we get to see it come to fruition. And you get to see, the groom's face as the bride walks down the aisle. And I know that's very cliche, but it's just such a special moment. And then you also get to see both of their reactions as they walk into their reception area that you've worked like so tirelessly on together, all of the details that you've put into lookbooks that have gone into rental orders and everything like that. And they can see their vision come to life. And that's just really special because you can talk and talk and talk about, I want, blue and white napkins and all of these details on the tables. And it's just something different to see it come together and their reactions to it. So that's always my favorite part.
Well, everyone, we are so very fortunate to have Hannah Baker with us, Sage Weddings in actually California, but now Idaho, possibly expanding into Colorado. And we are talking about the position of wedding coordinator. We're going to take a break. And when we come back, we are going to get into the nuts and bolts. And what I'm going to have Hannah do is really break down what a wedding looks like before the wedding, day of wedding, and then after the wedding from her perspective with the clients that she would have. So don't go anywhere. We'll be back right after this. I got a fun fact for you regarding wedding coordinators. Hope you enjoyed the first part of my interview or my conversation. I don't like to use the word interview. It is truly a conversation with Hannah Baker, Sage Weddings. Isn't this fun? I mean, this is why I love weddings. And really, honestly, it's helping me as well. Just to be able to kind of get an insight to these different parts of the wedding industry of people I work with, but I really don't know the full story. So not only are you getting educated, I'm getting educated as well. Well, it's time for fun facts time. We've already shared the percentage of people who are getting wedding coordinators. Again, 27%. What's up with that? People, it should be a much higher number. But you know what? A lot of that is due to budgeting. But I found this cool thing where it says, what makes a wedding planner unique? I'm going to read it to you. Here we go. Fun fact, often what makes a great wedding planner is the dedication to making a great event, which would be the wedding, and the experience to back it up, right? I use the word experience a lot, so it's good to see that's in the answer here. There are, however, some promising character traits that are beneficial, if not essential, to becoming a great planner, and they are imagination and creativity. And that's something Hannah's already talked about and is going to talk about more as we get into the second segment. So again, I hope you're enjoying Let's Talk Weddings. We have just launched. It is episode number 3. And let's get back to that professional voice that's going to get us back into this conversation. Boom. Okay.
Now back to Let's Talk Weddings, where wedding dreams meet industry experts. This is your backstage pass to the world of wedding vendors. Here is your host, Steve Buzzard.
All right, welcome back. Here we are. It is Hannah Baker, episode 3 of Let's Talk Weddings. So excited. I have been wanting to do this wedding podcast for a while. I was inspired by Matt Campbell. He was featured in the last episode, and he is the one who has his own podcast. It's called the Wedding Songs Podcast. I do encourage you to check it out. I loved his style, and what he would do is he was pulling back the curtain on the wedding industry with different vendors. I'm like, man, I want to do the same thing. So in a way, it's a duplication. I just have different people, and maybe we'll come across people that we both know and stuff. But I wanted to start locally. So we opened up with Joe Calamares, who's a great friend, and I know Hannah probably knows as well. Mentioned Matt Campbell, and now Hannah Baker is on the program. The wedding coordinator, which I think is the most important position, probably not used enough by couples, and there's various reasons that happen. But Hannah is so good at her job, and now I really want you to take me through what the wedding day looks like. So let's start when you make that initial contact with a couple. How does that look from Sage Weddings?
Yeah, so when we initially talk to couples, we always hop on a consultation call. During that call, we let our couples lead it because we want to know everything about their wedding day, whether they've planned anything yet, what their vision is, all of those details. Then we get into the nitty-gritty of, what are you thinking as far as coordination? Are you thinking you want to plan most of it and have us come in and execute for you and really do timelines, which would be more of a day of? Or are you thinking you need us to basically bring everything to fruition and let you sit back and do, full planning and design? And you get to look at lookbooks and all of those details and really just make the executive decisions on who you want to book.
Okay, very good. And then when a couple lands with you and says, you are the one, isn't that the greatest feeling when someone gives you the call or they give you that confirmation that, yes, we want to go with you?
Yes. It's always so wonderful.
I love that. So day of wedding, yes, but there's still much more. So you've landed the client, and there's so much that's going to happen, whether they book a year, year and a half, sometimes 2 years out. Kind of take us through that window before. So we're still in the pre-stage leading up to the day of the wedding.
Yeah, so pre-stage, once they're booked, we get all of the details from them. So whether they're doing day of, month of, partial or full planning, we hit the ground running. If they're bringing us on a little bit later and doing day of, we really focus on timelines and buttoning up details with vendors and make sure that we're doing all the logistics on the back end to make sure everything's going to run smoothly. However, on the flip side, if they're bringing us on for full planning, the fun begins at that point, I like to say. Full planning's by far my favorite because we get to be part of the design process. So get vendors in place, make sure that they're really bringing their dream team in. So of course, making suggestions based on personalities and vision and all of those details. And then going into the design portion where we put together endless lookbooks, rental orders, taking things from Pinterest boards and photos they sent us and all of that to bring it to life on paper so we can bring it to life in person come day of.
Can you dive a little deeper into what you're calling the lookbooks or the Pinterest boards, which I know brides are very familiar with? I think that's an interesting part because that's something you have to build up. So as you're kind of getting out of the gates, I don't know how much of that you put together, because now those lookbooks are based on the work that you've done. But as you started and kind of got yourself going, how did that part look for couples?
Yeah, so putting together the lookbooks in general, is that what you're asking?
Yes, lookbooks, or whether you're involved with the Pinterest boards and stuff and trying to create these visions for
Yeah.
the couples.
So we're really big on sending things back and forth on Instagram to our couples. So we get a lot of ideas from them on there through the planning process. By the time we get to kind of starting to put together lookbooks and boards and everything like that, we've been planning for some time. So we have vendors in place and all of that once the design phase hits. So Pinterest boards, typically our brides already have them put together. Sometimes we help with that. But it's basically just, going on the Pinterest website and then pulling ideas of what they might like for the wedding. And depending on the bride, it can have 16 different ideas for one thing on it, or it can be very streamlined of like, I know exactly what I want for my color scheme, and this is what I envision the day being. So being in the wedding industry, we then take our expertise and, maybe photos from past weddings or suggestions that would look good with what they're thinking of aesthetic wise. And we put together what I like to call a lookbook or a vision board, some people call it.
Mhm.
Florists also put them together as get quotes from them and everything. So very similar to that. But it basically goes through page by page of the color palette for the wedding, what we expect florals to look like, what cocktail hour looks like, what ceremony florals look like, if there's any special vision details for welcome books or anything like that. And then going into reception, everything down from the tablecloths to the napkins to what the menus look like. And it basically just breaks down every single aspect of the wedding on paper so you can visually see it, which is really important for some of our couples because they're very visual people, and it's hard to explain all of these details to them if they don't plan weddings every day. So we found it's very beneficial to the planning process, especially for our couples that come on for partial and full planning, where we would put all of those details in place for them. And so we'll send those things to florists to make sure they understand the vision, to decorators if they're bringing them in, to venues if we need to. And it just really helps bring everything together. And it's also something we can look back on when we're setting up day of if we're unsure about something, or thinking about details for welcome tables or anything like that.
I love it, Hannah. That was a tremendous breakdown right there. Well done. Well done. Talking like a great wedding coordinator. So the next question, like that's kind of going through my mind, and this is real, this is an education piece for me, right? Because when we talk about pulling behind the curtain, I see you usually day of, right? And yes, we communicate beforehand in terms of timeline, and then I'll speak to the couple, get all their music and stuff. But I don't really see you in action until day of wedding. So still in the pre-stage, you have different kinds of weddings, right? You might have one that's in the backyard, it might be local and stuff, but most are done at a venue. So talk about, that relationship with venues.
Yes. So I would say probably 50% of our weddings these days are private venue
Okay.
weddings.
Mhm.
So those are always wonderful, but venues that we work with on occasion, the relationship is just so important there. And we love going back to the same venues. And of course, we go to new places all the time. So we make sure to do walkthroughs beforehand and very comprehensive conversations with the venue manager if we haven't worked with them before. But going to a venue we've worked with in the past is always really wonderful because you understand any nuances that there are as far as maybe setup is concerned or breakdown later in the evening. You can talk to the couples about, your experience and any details we may need to bring in. For example, there's several venues that they give you tables and chairs, but they may not set them up for you. And sometimes it's not, black and white in the contract that they won't do those things. So being able to speak to those details and making sure that there's, enough staff there to set those up, whether it's the catering team or if the couple wants to do a working rehearsal the day before and have their wedding party set it up or anything like that, is just really important to make sure everything runs smoothly.
And for you, I'd have to imagine there's a comfort, right, with working at a place that you could be familiar with. You really don't have to ask any questions, kind of thing. Do you also enjoy seeing new venues? I know I do as a DJ. It's always like kind of exciting, right? Because you got to figure out the landscape and stuff, but just to see something brand new, I think is really fun.
Absolutely. We love new venues, love traveling to new venues. I think our first year in business for Sage Weddings, we went all over California, everywhere from, up the coast to like by Eureka to over by Yosemite and Santa Barbara and in between. And just like we're constantly going to new places. And it's just so much fun seeing new venues and like what they're capable of and how beautiful they are. And just working with couples from all over is really fun. It just makes it so that everything's always different. And I
Love
love
it.
that.
That's awesome. Okay, so day of wedding, right? I think one thing I've always thought of too is rentals, right? Like you got to rent stuff. How much of that ownership is on you, I guess, as opposed to being on the couple? I know you're probably a big part of that.
Yes. So again, depends on how they're bringing us on for planning. But no matter what planning portion we are involved in, we will always manage it come, several weeks prior to the wedding up until wedding day. So that means our team's on site for deliveries to make sure everything's there and in the correct area as far as rentals are concerned, making sure that staff is setting it up in the right areas. And of course, we're very hands-on, so we make sure that all of the details are in place. And then to making sure everything's packed back up at the end of the evening for the rental company to pick back up. For our full planning couples and our partial planning couples who bring us on several months ahead of time and we're part of that planning process, we manage the entire rental orders. So we put them together for them. We make sure to update them with final guest counts, par down any items we need to up until the wedding, and then of course making sure we're on site to get them in the right spaces. And a lot of times we'll pick up rentals too to make sure, if our couples don't want to spend that $300 on delivery and we're right down the street, absolutely, we're going to pick up your linens for you and make sure that they're there. So very hands-on with them, that's for sure.
I love that. I love that. So a standard wedding, if we're talking California, especially for me, would be a 4 o'clock ceremony, start music at 3:30, probably done by 10 o'clock. We have a lot of venues here in California where they have a time where they got to shut down by 10 o'clock, which seems strange because it used to be back in the day. I mean, you'd have weddings going past midnight. You don't see that too often. So for you, I was going to say day of wedding, but I know it starts obviously even sooner than that. It's kind of almost like a weekend for you because you got to get everything set up, and then you have the rehearsal and stuff. Take us through the nuts and bolts of that leading right into the day of wedding.
Yeah, so no matter the package we do, we always start at the 6 week or further ahead of that, just to make sure all of the details are in place. Again, just going through logistics, arrival times for vendors, sending out those timelines and diagrams and everything. And then come the week of the wedding, picking up rental orders if we need to. So typically that would be on a Wednesday or Thursday, depending the day that the wedding falls on. Going into ceremony rehearsal on Friday, potentially attending welcome dinner to make sure that design aspects are set up, or if they're doing speeches there, that those are going smoothly, breaking down any personal decor. Going into wedding day, we're there for the entire day. So basically as early as the venue lets us in, we're there to make sure all details are in place, that personal decor is put where it needs to be, vendors know where they need to be, and all questions are answered, and our couples at a good spot with getting ready and everything. And then of course making sure they get down the aisle and all of those details. And going into the next day, potentially being back there to make sure rentals are picked up if there's not a venue manager or anything like that. So it's definitely, for the most part, a whole weekend event to make sure everything runs smoothly for them.
So I am curious though, like, do you have like, for me, like when I set up, I always will set up my main setup first, and then I'll go set up my ceremony, and then I'll set up my cocktail hour. So that's kind of always my 1, 2, 3. If I have 3 different spots, for you, is there that same kind of thinking, or does it depend on the wedding and the venue?
I think it kind of depends on the venue itself and how extensive the setup is too. Because again, every wedding is different. So if there's pretty extensive setup, we'll go straight into ceremony because it's the first spot that guests see. On the flip side, if they're walking through cocktail hour to go to ceremony, that would be the main thing I would focus on to begin with, to make sure that like welcome table is set up first thing, decor is put on tables, going over to ceremony afterwards, and then ending with reception. I will say, however, the first portion of the day goes, reception is always the last portion that we will focus on, just because there is the opportunity, if for some reason, and it doesn't happen very often, but if we're running behind for any reason, we can put down, place cards during cocktail hour if need be. It happens very rarely, but as a fail-safe, we always focus on cocktail hour and ceremony to begin with.
Well, and I'm glad you said that, like a bit of transparency, right? Like in our minds as vendors, we imagine everything going perfect, and there's a lot of things that go wrong. And one of those might be being behind and stuff, but we do our very best as vendors, knowing that things will happen. I think that's a big piece of this is you have to be ready to pivot, as I like to say. That became a popular word a few years ago. Would you say that's a strong word in the vocabulary of a wedding coordinator?
Absolutely. We pivot in every direction,
Yeah.
every 10 minutes. And I think it's also very important to note that we may pivot like several times during the day, but to a couple or to their guests, they would never know. So I always let our couples know as we're planning, even though our timelines have everything from the last bouquet you have for your bridesmaids in them, they're a guide. And at the end of the day, we're all human, so sometimes things run smoothly, sometimes things may need to be shifted a little bit, and it's just how the cookie crumbles. But your guests will never know, and honestly, when you're enjoying yourselves, if speeches end up 5 minutes later than they're supposed to, you'll have no idea, and you'll just enjoy the rest of the evening.
Yeah, my favorite one is when the ceremony, 9 out of 10 times, does not start on time. And I always just say, it's a wedding, right? You don't have to worry. It'll be fine, and everything will catch up to itself. So at the end of the wedding, right? I think this is where vendors, or a lot of vendors, miss the mark, is the follow-up, right? It's over. Probably the couple's going to go on a honeymoon, right? And then there's that gap. But you must follow up as a vendor, as a way of just saying thank you for the opportunity. I know for myself, my personal touch is I'll take some photos and videos, just some quick things to kind of give them those memories and everything, to say, hey, I know your professional photos and videos are coming, but here's a little something to remind you of that great day. Talk about a follow-up from a wedding coordinator standpoint.
Yes, and I do have to interject before I tell you about ours. Steve did our wedding, my husband and I's, and it was amazing, of course.
Yeah.
But Steve, you sent over the album of photos afterwards, and one of the photos you took was my profile photo on Facebook for like a year. So it was wonderful. It was amazing. You do a great job there.
I always say you never know. So here's the truth, Hannah. It used to be I had a professional camera, and I would literally act like I was the second photographer. And I had to admit, I don't know how I got away with it, because there was only one photographer in a span of, it must have been like 10 years that I was doing this, that came up to me and said, why do you have a camera? Aren't you the DJ? And I go, yeah, but I take photos on the side. And she goes, I am the professional photographer here. So I put that baby away, and okay, maybe I need to change course here. And I did. So I just do iPhone stuff. But the iPhone takes great stuff. But there used to be a day when I was like up in it and, taking professional photos. I just think it's just fun. So that's good. I'm glad you enjoyed that.
Well, if it makes you feel better, I did the same thing and bought a very expensive professional camera. And I love all the photos we get back from photographers, but sometimes they don't have a ton of detail photos in them of like the tablescapes, which is what we like to market. So you can kind of see the different things. So I was that person as well for a while.
Oh, good.
And then
I feel
I
better.
felt conscious about it and was like, maybe I shouldn't be doing this.
Yeah.
So it's
Well,
now.
and I was just, for me, I was just thinking of it, not only just a personal touch, but from a marketing standpoint
Yeah,
too.
exactly.
You got to find those little things that are just going to make you a little bit different, than the other person. So we've taken you through the wedding. Like, that's it. Hannah's done it. You can see she does a fantastic job. You can see the attention to detail. And we're going to take another break. This will be our last break. And when we come back, we're going to kind of wind things down. We're going to talk about, marketing and pricing, what that looks like for a wedding coordinator. And then we're going to talk about Hannah's wedding a little bit. That's right. I was the DJ. We let the cat out of the bag. It was a really great wedding in April of 2023. So don't go anywhere. More of Let's Talk Weddings right here on the podcast.
Now back to Let's Talk Weddings, where wedding dreams meet industry experts. This is your backstage pass to the world of wedding vendors. Here is your host, Steve Buzzard.
All right, welcome back. Final segment here. Let's Talk Weddings. It's Hannah Baker of Sage Weddings. We're going to put all of her information on the page so you can make sure that if you're like, hey, we're looking for a wedding coordinator, definitely go to Hannah. She does a great job, her and her team. And if you're in Idaho, because this is a podcast, it's going everywhere, get Hannah. I mean, Hannah could be a great WC for you. I call them WCs. So when we left off, Hannah, we didn't get to that part where we talked about the follow-up. I kind of jumped a little ahead there, but talk about that follow-up from your standpoint.
Yeah, so we always do a follow-up as well. I always like to ask our couples if they're going on a vacation or a honeymoon of some sort, because I like to give them that time afterwards to kind of just soak in the fact that they've just gotten married and enjoy themselves and not have to worry about several emails that are coming to them or any questions or anything. So we usually do it a few weeks afterwards, just depending on how long they're gone for and giving them some time together. But we always send an email out just saying thank you so much and putting some experiences together within that email that we loved about our planning process together. And then we always throw in, we market on Wedding Wire and The Knot, so I always throw that in there in case they want to send a love note on there for a future couple to see, because it always helps us reach more people at that point. And it's always really positive whether they would leave the review or not, and it just helps us create those relationships. And I still have couples to this day that will randomly text me and be like, hey, we missed talking to you, like, you're wonderful, and vice versa. If we find something funny on Instagram or something, we'll send it to them. And we always tell them, you kind of got a friend for life if you book with us. So it's really great.
No, that's good. And so with couples, like, who you are and how you would describe yourself, what are the things that you get back from couples that are consistent across the board that they're saying about you?
Yeah, so they always tell me I'm very calm. And I noted, thank you.
I've never seen you get upset, mad, or anything. It don't happen.
No, it really doesn't. And absolutely not trying to toot my own horn. I kind of thrive in stress. Yeah. So during the wedding day, if someone has an issue, we just immediately make sure we find a solution to it. And my biggest thing is we want to make sure that everything runs as smoothly as possible. So we've got game faces on once the day starts or once the weekend starts. And that's what I typically get back from guests, that, their friends and family said how smiley our team was, how cool, calm, and collected we are, and how everything just seemed one step ahead. So it's always really humbling and very kind to see those words, because it just means we're doing our job right.
Exactly. That's great. And I would concur with all of that. That is good stuff. So you mentioned The Knot and Wedding Wire. And I think this is a subject that has come up, and I'm curious to find out from a wedding coordinator standpoint of where you stand on that. So when I spoke with Joe Calamaris, he brought up a very good point that if you're trying to get into the business, it is a good avenue to go down. It may not necessarily have the impact needed when you're more established. What is it like for a wedding coordinator with having that service, out of curiosity?
I kind of agree with him on that. When we first started, we were primarily just word of mouth, Facebook. Part of the wedding pages would comment on posts and be like, hey, if you're looking for someone, feel free to reach out, kind of thing. And then I have a really good girlfriend who's a wedding planner in the Napa area who had marketed on Wedding Wire and The Knot, and she decided against it because she didn't think it was worth it monetarily. And we were like, okay, well, we're just going to take the plunge to see what works. And I've been doing it for Sage Weddings for 3 years now, and I would say a really good chunk of our leads come off of there.
Okay.
And on the back end of things, you can kind of see who clicks to your website too. So you could track, the clickability into like inquiries coming through your website and everything. And I think a lot of the leads come through there, which is wonderful. On the flip side, I do think a Google presence is really important, and it's something that we've been working on the back end, because when you search wedding planner, you have like the Google results up top, and then you have the Not in Wedding Wire, and you can click on them. Well, I think it really shows something if you have that Google listing right there, because people are going to click on it. It's the first thing they see. So,
I think
yeah.
that's prominent because when I rebuilt my website, that was actually the main thing that my website developer said. He said, "I'm going to jack this up so that you are number one on,
Yeah.
when people do Google." And he knew all about that. They call it SEO or whatever. I have no understanding of it. I just trusted him, and it really did make a big difference. So yeah, you could type buzzard ball, and I definitely would dominate, right? Because nobody else has that. But it's those general terms like, right, wedding coordinator, wedding DJ in Sacramento. You want to make sure that your name is in there. So I'm glad that you brought that up because that's a big deal.
Yeah, absolutely. And with Sage Weddings, even though we think our name's unique, there are so many different Sage type of wedding names out there. For example, up here in the Idaho region, there's Ivory and Sage, and we're
You're
Sage
kidding.
Wedding.
In Idaho?
Yeah, and there's another one in the Sacramento area too. I think
Okay.
it's another color in sage.
Yeah.
So it's pretty common. Not common enough where there's several different ones, but enough where you could click on one and think it's the other. So we're working on our visibility with Google itself, but I do think Wedding Wire and the Knot is worth it, at least in my opinion, for wedding
Okay.
planning.
No, that's good. It's good to hear. And I like what you said about you actually go to the next level, right? Because a lot of people look at it as cold leads, but you were talking about getting into, who's tracking on your website that will help you kind of, I guess, hone in on who it is that you can see as a future client. So that's a very good point, and people are going to it. So pricing, with vendors, I always say, hey, listen, you can say it or not say it. I am curious if there's whatever information you can share. I'll leave it there because I'll tell you what my thought is about pricing from a DJ standpoint, but I'd like to hear it from your standpoint of what you either present or don't present.
Okay. I think that pricing is a really interesting thing to talk about. Um, Especially because we expanded this past year, and noting that California has such an influx of
Yeah.
weddings that the median rate for wedding planning down there is like expensive up
Yeah.
here in Idaho. So we have two different packages. We have Idaho and like Montana, Wyoming, because everything's pretty close up here. And then we have like California, Pacific Northwest. And we outline these on our website, so feel free to click on the stuff Steve puts below. But it ranges anywhere between like 1850 at our lowest to up to 7,000 as it sits right now,
Yep.
and everything in between, just depending on the planning package. I will say that Idaho is a little bit less just because of, how much people spend on weddings up
Right.
here. It's just a little bit different than California.
Yeah, no, and that makes sense. Totally makes sense. So for you, there's a lot of variables, right, within wedding coordinating.
Exactly. Yep. Different variables, and there's just different things that go into weddings for different couples. So full planning and full design is going to be more, and just day of with us managing things will be less. So
Okay, good. Makes sense. Totally makes sense. So marketing, you had mentioned word of mouth. We had talked about Wedding Wire and the Knot. What are the other forms of marketing that you guys do for Sage Weddings?
Instagram ads. Those are really great. They're super clickable too, and it brings a lot of people to our page. We've been working a lot on our visibility this year. Since last year was so busy, we took a step back to really hone in on, for lack of a better term, like our aesthetic for everything. So our website got revamped this past year.
Which, by the way, looks very, very nice.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. It was a labor of love, that's for sure. But slowly but surely, kind of working on a blog that will hopefully kind of bring in more foot traffic and
Well, and
turn.
I heard that's a big thing, especially with wedding coordinators, is doing a blog because I don't know if people know this, but there's a lot of traffic that results if you are putting a blog on your website.
Yes, there is. And they're so fun to read. So we have a few of them put together. They just haven't launched yet.
And that
Um,
would just be what the story of a couple's day, their
yeah.
wedding, correct?
Yeah, story about our planning journey and, maybe some favorite things from the bride and groom and some fun details that went into planning. Our first one is going to be about a wedding you did with us last year with Gianna and Patrick at
Oh
Grand.
yeah. Oh my gosh.
Yes.
That was a Grand Island mansion.
Yeah.
That
They,
was some wedding.
oh, yes. It was our I don't want to say largest wedding because we had ones larger than that guest size, but our largest weddings in the aspect of all of the details that went into
Yes.
it. And it was just so much meticulous planning, and they had so many very unique, like very intentional details that went into it, from everything from, the newspaper we put together with their love story in it, to the beautiful scroll that went down on their welcome table of one of their favorite quotes. And our bride was really trying to bring in some of her heritage and everything like that throughout it. So it was really wonderful. So that'll be our first one going up. And then we always like to put in our weddings, given our photographers are okay with that, to magazines. So bridal magazines and everything like that. And we've been featured a few times. So that's really great too for marketing.
Yeah, could you dive into the, or, just on the surface, I get, but Instagram ads, right? Like, okay, I know what they are, but what is it that, what do you primarily spend on that and how do those work for you? I've always been curious about Instagram ads and Facebook ads because you hear kind of different opinions on those.
Yes, I personally don't like Facebook ads. I
Okay,
think Instagram brings more people
I agree.
for like clickability
Mhm.
in all encompassing. But with Instagram ads, you can choose how long they run for. So it really just depends on how much you pay for them. It can be anywhere between, $10 and hundreds of dollars. We never spend hundreds of dollars on them. We'll run them for a few days and it helps bring more people or, bring light to something we're trying to bring light to on there. And it's everything from why do you need a wedding planner to just a really great wedding album that we want to showcase and just bring more people to our page. So I think they work. We don't run them, weekly. We usually do once a month or bi-monthly, but they're great.
That's good. No, and you said they work for you, so that's good. And you're
Yeah.
not spending gobs of money on it. So thank you for giving us a little insight on that. So as we kind of wrap things up, I think a big thing with weddings are trends, right? Like what's in and what's going out. So what are you seeing that's coming in and maybe is phasing out with weddings that you're doing these days?
Yeah. So something I'm so excited for, and we're seeing so much this year, is color. So we
Okay.
have so many couples going for very colorful flowers and some really fun like patterns on linens or napkins or anything like that. So we've seen a lot of that, which I hope continues, just for my personal love of everything color. But we're kind of seeing the same old of like the golds and the pinks and the greens kind of go out the window and some more
Okay.
color brought in and some really intentional pieces for weddings. So the classic is still very beautiful and we still have weddings do it, but with more of a spin these days. So it's really fun for the design aspect of things. I will say we have a lot of couples kind of going away from the norm as far as how a timeline usually runs too. So maybe not doing first dances or parent dances, or maybe not doing traditional speeches, or even sprinkling speeches throughout dinner instead of all together. Maybe not doing a grand entrance and doing one into cocktail hour instead. Just fun little different details and not being as structured as, we saw several years ago, which is really fun.
I love it. That's great. I love the one I just did a couple weeks ago. I thought I'd never seen this before, where they did a speech and then it went into a special dance. and then they did another speech. And so they wrapped it all into the dinner portion of the program. And I'm like, wow, I've never seen that, but it flowed very well. And so I love when you talk about the intentionality of, and I tell couples too, listen, bottom line, this is your wedding, right? However you want it to look, we are here to execute whatever it is that you need as vendors. So I love when people kind of go outside the box a little bit. So I love that you brought up those things, because I'm sitting here going, oh yeah, that's right. That's definitely right. So good stuff.
We have some like amazing ideas from our couples. I think you and I are doing a wedding together next year where our bride wanted to do a do not playlist, but
Yeah.
people can pay for the songs to be
Yeah.
played to go towards her honeymoon. I'm like, that is genius. Absolutely. She wants to put like a tombstone together that has the songs on it. It's going to be amazing. So
Yeah, something, we had never heard before. We're like, oh my gosh, you were like, why didn't I think of this? But that's great. That's what's great about the couples. So, last thing we have to finish on was your wedding. Like, you gave me the honor of being the DJ for your wedding at Mountain Shadows Retreat, a beautiful, beautiful venue with probably I would say one of the more iconic like backdrops for a ceremony. And so, first of all, I've told you many times, but thank you for the honor. But just that day was so special. What was it like for you? I've already asked you this question, but now you're going to tell the world. Like, what was that like for you to get married, but yet you were not the coordinator and you kind of had to let that go, or did you let that go?
once a coordinator, always a coordinator.
Right. It's in your DNA. It's in your DNA.
It very much is. I will coordinate things every day.
Yeah.
But it was different being on the other side of things. I will say I planned most of our wedding, and then I handed it off to Laura, who's absolutely wonderful on our team, and she executed it the weekend of, which she was absolutely amazing. Things went off without a hitch. There was absolutely no details that were dropped. Going back, if I were to do it again, I probably would have let someone else do it for me.
Oh, okay.
And I think it just solidifies the things I tell to our couples. Like, planners are very important. Going through the year, our team, did the most weddings we've ever done last year. And it was already very, very busy. And I was on a wedding, the week prior to our wedding. And there was a lot of details that we were putting together. And the week after our wedding, we had another wedding. So it didn't really take much time for myself. So I think I would have just taken a beat and let someone else even just do like 6 weeks prior so I could relax a little bit. But it also gave me perspective of details that we know as planners, but we don't experience. So, for example, we opted for a later ceremony. I think it was at 5 or 5:30, if I remember correctly. And as we all know, or as some may know, there's a 10 o'clock noise ordinance in California, and we were outdoors. So that doesn't give a lot of time for everything involved. 5:30 to 10 o'clock is 4.5 hours for ceremony, cocktail hour, and reception. So we felt a little rushed when it came to photos and everything like that. And we did it purposely for various reasons, sunset being one of them. But just, it made me be a little more cognizant with future couples of like, hey, this is what I experienced. Let's use this and plan so that you don't feel that way like I felt on my wedding day. And it was nothing that, ruined it by any means. It was absolutely beautiful. We may have not gotten one photo we wanted, but that's great. Overall, it was absolutely beautiful. The dancing was amazing. I think I was on the dance floor all night.
You were.
Absolutely all night.
Yep.
That is my MO. I think my husband was out there for maybe 20 minutes with me at the most important parts. He's not a dancer, but it was absolutely like the best time ever. And I wouldn't have done it any other way.
That's good stuff.
That's
Well, you guys, yeah. Oh man, I tell you, it was so fun. And to me, I felt like it's interesting you said that you kind of felt rushed and everything. And again, this is all perspective from my standpoint. I felt like it had just this really nice flow. I think a lot of that had to do with the venue being all inclusive. I'm a big fan of the all inclusive venues rather than having to go 300 yards to the ceremony and 250 more yards over this way to do the cocktail hour. Like, I'll do those too, but the ones that are kind of close together, I think that's like perfect. And you guys absolutely nailed that. So
Thank you. Yes, the vision came to life perfectly.
Yep.
In the grand scheme of things, everything was so close together. So
Yeah.
that's what made it work time-wise. But yeah,
Yeah.
it
Well,
worked.
Hannah, I mean, this has been a great conversation, and I'm hoping for people out there, whether you're a vendor or I always say this is also for couples too, to really get a kind of behind the scenes look. And also a big reason why you'd want to dial up Hannah and have her be your wedding coordinator. And so we finished with that. What are the ways that people can find you?
Yeah, so we're on our website. It's sageweddings.net. We have a form you can fill out there to reach out, and we always try and reach out same day, if not next day, if we're on site with a wedding. Just noting weekends can be busy at times. You can, of course, find us on the Knot and Wedding Wire. We have pages on both of those, or via Instagram or Facebook. All of our contact information's on both. And yeah, we look forward to talking with all of you if you reach out. And I think something really important too, as we've gone through all of the details of wedding planning, is, we're here for everything from day of to full planning, but we also do consulting for those of you that
Okay.
maybe don't have the budget for a planner, but you feel a little bit lost. We
Ooh.
can put together timelines for you and all of those details to make sure that at least you have those in place so you feel good kept day of.
Wow. Okay, that's a big piece right there because that's maybe something that maybe other people don't offer, but being the fact that you kind of recognize like, listen, couples are going to fall in different places and this consulting piece, I think, man, will probably perk up a lot of eyebrows and be, oh, wow, that might be a good option for us.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I believe that everyone is entitled to like a great wedding planner, even if it's not something that's within budget. So even if it's just a conversation of like, hey, here's how you stay on track, here's like general timeline of things, and you can fill in the blanks. I think it's just really important for people
Makes
rather
total
than
sense. Makes total sense. And that's if you still want to do it yourself, but you're like, you know what? It'd be nice to hear from someone who knows how to do it and can kind of give me some good information. So I love that piece of it. Very good. You saved that right for the end. It was great. So we've done it. Your first podcast is in the books, Hannah. How do you feel you did?
I feel great. This was really fun.
Telling you, I'm telling you. So even though she is in Idaho, still remember, California friends, that she's still doing California weddings. She has a team, but Hannah will make that trip down to California. I told her she has to because I know I'm going to be working more weddings with her. And you know what? Maybe I'll drive up to Idaho and do an Idaho wedding. I would do that for you, Hannah. I would do that for
Steve,
sure.
the first thing I told Andrew, my husband, for all of you, when we moved up here is, gosh, I hope I can find a Steve up here.
Oh, that's kind. That's kind. And that just, you know what? It speaks to our friendship, our partnership and stuff. Like I said, we met a few years ago. Didn't realize it was the first event for Sage. That's even more special to me. I just know there's more to come, and I'm very happy for your success.
Thank you. Well, thanks for having me, Steve. And for those of you in California, we will absolutely come back down. We don't charge travel fees for it because California is in our hearts. And yeah, happy to be here. So
All
happy to
right.
be on the podcast.
There she is, Hannah Baker. That will do it. Until next time, we'll be with you in 2 weeks where I'll speak to another wedding vendor. Not even sure which direction I'm going to go, but now you know what it's like to pull back the curtain on a wedding coordinator and their life. We'll see you next time. I hope you enjoyed Let's Talk Weddings. Did you know I also have another podcast? It's the original, the one we started back in January of 2021, and that is Experience the Buzz. And in fact, we are releasing 2 episodes, one for Let's Talk Weddings and one for Experience the Buzz in the same week. That's right. So check it out. I'm going to be speaking with a guy named Christian Dyer, 26-year-old professional rugby player. I knew him when he was a kid roaming the streets of Carmichael, California, and he's done some very, very big things, and I know you are going to love his inspiring story on Experience the Buzz. Don't miss it.
Thank you so much for listening to today's Let's Talk Weddings podcast episode. Be sure to join Steve next time when he talks to another outstanding vendor in the wedding industry. The Let's Talk Weddings podcast can be found on all podcast platforms, including Apple and Spotify. Let's Talk Weddings is also featured on YouTube under Experience the Buzz. For more information about Steve Buzzard and his work, head to buzzardball.com or follow Steve on Instagram at BuzzardBallExperience.